Hi everyone and welcome to this video. This video is going to be called How to Solder or something along the lines of that. This is going to be an interesting video for me because I have no qualifications in electronics whatsoever and I've got about 18 months of experience. My qualifications are in computer science, which is very different really. So the reason why that's interesting is because a lot of people, especially on the internet, are sort of like oh, you can't do that, blah blah blah, you can't do this, you have to do it this way, and people get a bit pedantic and whatever. So yeah, I've got no qualifications, doing it 18 months, and this is how I've learned the best way to do soldering, and it's completely devoid of standards. I'm not tainted by books, I'm not tainted by teachers, this is purely the way I've learned. Right, to start with, this is what I'm going to cover in this video. I'm going to cover what soldering is, what you're going to need, and then how to do it. And I'm going to cover how to do through-hole soldering. I'm going to cover how to solder modules, which kind of is through-hole as well. I'm going to cover SMT, and I'm going to cover splicing wires together. So since this is directed at beginners, we'll say what soldering is. Now, it's a little bit silly to say what soldering is really, because pretty much everyone is going to know, but soldering is where you have two metal contacts, two conductors of electricity, and you need to join them together somehow. So what we do is, if for example there's a pin sticking out here which needs to be connected to a circuit, you could push it through this PCB, and the PCB would have tracks in it, which is basically flattened wires put onto the surface of the PCB, and basically the pin needs to be connected electronically to the track. And to do that, what we do is we push the pin through, and then we melt some wire which basically joins them together. It forms a good solid connection, and it makes it electronically conductive while keeping it very sturdy. Look, I mean, you can't pull it apart. So that's soldering anyway. The next thing I will cover is what we need. So the first thing we'll need is solder. So yeah, solder, I've got different types of solder, which I'm going to go into this in a bit more depth in a minute to explain what the differences are and whatever, but you need solder. The next thing, you technically don't need it, but it's very good to have it, and this is flux, or some people call it fluxite. The other things you're going to need is, of course, a soldering iron. So a soldering iron, you'll need one of those. The next thing you'll need, I say need, because I think they're very important, this thing is called helping hands, and yeah, I'd say it's pretty essential really for if you want to do any good soldering jobs. Also, a breadboard. Now, people might be thinking at this point, what the hell do you need that for? But no, I think you do need one. They come in very, very useful. So also, blue tack. Now in the UK this is called blue tack. It's made by a company called Bostik. In America, which is where most of my viewers are, I don't know what this is called. But it's basically like a sticky, I don't know, like a sticky, rubbery, putty-like substance, and basically it sticks things together. Look. So yeah, there's that. Also tweezers. Well, I've got tweezers here somewhere. They are tweezers. You'll probably need some tweezers, especially for SMT stuff. And finally, heat shrink. I haven't actually got any heat shrink here at the moment. I'll get some later. But heat shrink is it's like a plastic tube which you insert over a wire, over a connection, and then you heat it up after, and it makes a really good joint, or a really tidy looking joint, and it also insulates the metal underneath too. So yeah, heat shrink, you would probably need that too. So since we're doing a soldering video, let's start with the solder. So you get different types of solder. Let's look at these two here. So you get different types of solder, and the different types are plumbing solder and electrical solder or electronic solder, and they're very different, and it does matter which one you get. So the first thing we need to discuss is that you won't actually be able to see, but inside there, it's kind of hollow when they make it, and they insert a substance, or they pump a substance in called flux, which is actually what I just shown you in those tubes a minute ago. So the flux inside this one, this plumbing solder, is different to the flux inside this one, and the flux inside this one is it's an acidic flux. And it's acidic because plumbers need the copper to be very clean, and basically what happens is that the flux inside this is very corrosive. It's good at cleaning stuff, but it's far too corrosive for electronics, far too corrosive. This one, on the other hand, contains a substance called rosin, and rosin's not as corrosive. It's very mild. So of course we want it to clean, but we don't need to go too crazy. And we want to protect the rest of the circuit and whatever. We don't want it to corrode the metal like crazy. So yeah, electronic solder is the solder to get, because you don't want to end up damaging your circuit with this plumbing stuff. So don't use the plumbing stuff, use the electronic solder. So moving on, even in electronic solder you get two different types again. You get leaded solder and unleaded solder. Well, unleaded solder could be lead-free solder. And this again is a pretty easy choice. Lead, when it burns or whatever, when it melts, it's not very good for your health. There's apparently a vapour which just isn't very good for you. So there's that. The other thing as well is that the lead solder has a lower melting point. The lead-free solder has a higher melting point. And the higher one is better, really, because when you're dealing with CPUs and GPUs, which to be fair we're not, but basically if things start heating up, this one is more tolerant to it than the leaded one. So yeah, again, get the lead-free solder because most of the time it's better. Just another thing on solder, it comes in two main forms, and that's on a spool, which is this one, and in a, I don't know what this is called, what would this be called, like a dispenser, I suppose. So you can get it on a spool or on a dispenser, and it doesn't really matter which one you prefer. I mean, some people prefer the spool, some people prefer the dispenser. The spool one is usually better value than the dispenser, but I actually prefer the dispenser, and the reason being is because when you're working with the spool, you kind of have to hold it like that when you're working. I don't particularly like that. It's not very comfortable. So I use a dispenser, which is this, and the reason being is because you can just push them out, and then as you're soldering, you can hold it like that, like a pen, and I find that to be a lot more comfortable. So you could use any, but I prefer this little dispenser. The next thing I'll talk about is flux. So you don't actually need to buy flux, but if you do buy it and you do use it, I find that it makes soldering a lot easier. It tends to make the solder flow nicer. It flows easier. It doesn't seem to get, it doesn't get dirty, and it generally makes it, it just generally makes it easier, and it just makes a better job, in my opinion. And again, you can buy this in different forms. You can buy it in it comes in a metal cylinder, like a petri dish shape, in a paste, and you can dip components into it and stuff, and you can get it in pen form. And as you can see, I buy it in pen form. I don't like the paste because I think it's too messy, and you end up using more than you need to, and it's not easy to direct it where you want it. But with these, it's much easier, because if I just show you here, what you do is you just, with this particular one, you just dab it down. So if I want to tap it on something, I just go tap 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 tap, and it just puts a little bit of flux on, not too crazy, just enough to do what you need to do. And this one is slightly different. This one's a pen, so you just simply take the cap off and you just draw over where you want to clean. So they're the two types, and they're the types that I use. But yeah, again, you don't actually need Flux, you don't have to have Flux, but I would say get it. And then when it comes to paste or pen, that's up to you, or paste or liquid, that's up to you. I prefer liquid, and I prefer it in a pen form. The next thing I'll talk about is soldering irons. So of course it's pretty critical that you need to have one, and there's different types, and to start with, what I'll mention is the power. So you get different power ones. So this one here, you can see it says Weller and it says 12 watts, and this, as you may be able to notice, it's very small, it's very lightweight, and yeah, it still has its use. And this one here, you can see that it's got a big thick cable, and this is very large. You can see it's very big, and this is 100 watts. It's got a big thick piece here and a very big thick tip, and this can also be very useful, but they're for very different things. See, this one is for very heavy duty things, and if I was to use this on a little PCB like this, for example, it would just go crazy and it would burn the thing. It's just far too powerful. So 100 watts, far too powerful for this sort of thing. And this one here, which is the 12 watt one, that's not really powerful enough. But you know, this thing is for tiny little, PCBs, maybe SMT or something like that. And this one's for huge amplifiers and whatever. You know, where there are large contacts to solder, you'd use a big thing like this. But anyway, that's what they're for. So you do really need to get the right size. And for me, I'd go for around 40 watts, like this one. This is a 40 watt soldering iron, and this is the one that you probably see quite a lot of my videos, because I've got quite a few different soldering irons, and this one feels about right. It heats up in the right amount of time. It doesn't overly heat the board or anything, so about 40 watts is about right for microcontroller stuff. So yeah, that's about soldering iron. There are different types. I mean, they can be powered in different ways. So this one is a electric soldering iron, and you can actually get electric ones and you can get gas ones as well. So the electric ones here, they take a while to heat up, and they have a wire, which of course can be a bit of a pain. So there's another one that you can get here. I think I'll zoom out a bit actually. There's another one you can get. This is a gas powered one, and they heat up really quickly. Yeah, they heat up really quickly. Of course there's no wire, and this particular one is very light, and it's actually very well designed. I mean, you can be so precise with it, but I assume that that's partly down to the quality of it rather than the type. But anyway, you just basically flick that, turn the gas on and turn it on. So there's different types of soldering iron, and of course you can make your mind up which you prefer. These are generally a little bit more expensive, but this is my preferred soldering iron of all of them. And the other thing about these gas ones as well is that the power is variable. This says Solder Pro 70, and what that's supposed to mean is that when it's on full power, it equates to 70 watts. When it's on low, of course, you can have like 5, 10, 15, depends how much you vary this little thing here. Anyway, that's my favourite soldering iron, but it's not necessary to have a gas one. Some people are bothered about the brands of soldering irons too, and I guess I do have something to say about that. This one is an Antex soldering iron, which is one of the best ones really. This one is Weller, which is also very well respected. This one is not branded. It's a cheap one that I got from eBay, and this one is a Roda, which was considered to be a premium brand. I don't know if it is anymore, but yeah, I've got more soldering irons as well that are various different brands, and what I found is that the the better brands are generally more ergonomic. They're a lot easier to hold, and they're a lot more user friendly. Whereas, I mean, you can see here actually the Weller one. You can see that it's almost triangulated, and also the Antax one is the same. So they're generally better ergonomically, and yeah, they're better ergonomically. In terms of performance, though, I'd say they're about the same. I mean, they heat up about the same rates and whatever. So yeah, that's that. There is another thing about these brands. I do think the branded ones do last longer. Because these ones, this particular one has lasted a while, but usually these cheap soldering irons last about 6 months to 9 months or something like that. And they get damaged easily as well. You can see here that it's all melted. Whereas the more expensive ones don't seem to do that. But anyway, yeah. And then going back to these things, so we've got the helping hands, the not the PCB, the breadboard, and the blue tack, and also the tweezers. These are tools that you might need, which I think will help, and I'll just tell you why. I found that with with soldering, if the base or the foundation or the stability or whatever of the thing you're trying to solder is no good, then the soldering job will be no good either. It's a lot harder. If you can keep the piece stable and joined together and in such a state where it doesn't want to split apart as you're soldering it, you'll do a lot better. So yeah, the helping hands, that's just to hold two pieces together. Maybe you'll twist them in the middle if it's a wire or something like that, or you'll hold the chip upwards or whatever. So for like this, for example, if you're soldering this, you do something like that. You'd hold it from the bottom and solder it like that. And basically the helping hands makes the job a lot easier, and I found that with things being stable you do a better job. So that's the helping hands. With this, I use this for holding microcontrollers. So for example, this is a Nano. If I wanted to solder the Nano, I wouldn't really use the helping hands like that. I wouldn't really do that. I'd put these pins in here. Sorry, I put the pins in the breadboard. Then I'd align this microcontroller or board, push it in so that those are showing, and then I'd solder down there and down there while it's in the breadboard. And I find that that's a lot easier. So that's the breadboard. That's what I use the breadboard for in soldering. The blue tack. Let's say you have something which doesn't fit in the helping hands, and it's not something that could fit in there. You might want to just, keep it still with a bit of blue tack like that. You might just want to hold it in place so that it doesn't, try and move all over the place as you're soldering it. So that's what I use the blue tack for. And the tweezers I use for SMT, which I'll show you in a bit. Basically, with tiny components, sometimes I'm right-handed, but I'm right-handed, so I have to solder with my right hand. But sometimes you need to push down on a component, or you need to grab hold of it to stop it moving while you solder. Anyway, so that's that.